welcome to Marshall, Minnesota for the next installment of our Brewery Tour Series podcast. I am here at the new tap room for the Brau Bros Brewery, and we're in for a special treat. We're going to find out what makes Brau Bros beers so special. So kick back, grab a beer, and join with us. Prost! Okay, everybody, we're now inside of Brau Bros Brewery here, and I'm here with Dustin from Brau Bros Brewing.
Thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having us. Why don't we start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of the company as a whole? Because I know this wasn't always your location here, so.
No, that's right. In fact, it was a recent move. In fact, this is actually our third brewing facility when you think about it. We started out as a brew pub. So in '99, we started brewing, really small brewing setup, corner store in Lucan. Our brewery then was, it was 11 foot by 14 foot. I ran about a 60-barrel brew house, or 60-gallon brew house, I'm sorry. And just to kind of give you I always tell people the fire truck parked in our tap room right now is bigger than our original brewery. So the scaling's changed a little bit. In 2006, we moved from that facility out to what people affectionately call the Red Barn, the brewery on the edge of Lucan. And put up the hop yard, started planting some barley, doing some malting and whatnot. And that was a lot of fun. Now, it was a 5,000 square foot building, and so we struggled with space and efficiency and things, issues like that. And so, we with a taproom law and with some changes in the laws, it allowed us to do something like this. So now we're in about just under 40,000 square feet here in Marshall. We started brewing here, about 6 weeks ago. The tap room opened on October 5th, so this is really new to us, and so, but it's fun. It's not unlike a lot of breweries, and that scaling tends to be one of your major concerns, especially early on.
What kind of challenges do you see different between your old brewery, the Red Barn, which Andy and I are familiar with, versus here? I mean, what kind of challenges did you see in that?
Well, the challenge there was just space and how it affected your efficiency. We were moving stuff around all the time in order to get basic functions done in the brew house, just moving stuff around, rotating your stock in the cooler, issues like that. And so here, our challenge right now is just setting up systems. Everything has to have a system, from how you ship out beer to what your brew day is like, to when and how you do tours in the tap room. And so we're establishing all those you might call them standard operating procedures, but all the systems that we need in order to make things flow easily.
Okay, so now let's get back into your personal history here a little bit. How did you start brewing? I'm assuming you started up as a home brewer and worked your way up. And
Yep, that's exactly right. I home brewed through college, and had my wife and I both have hotel restaurant degrees, so we knew we were going to go into food service or something in the hospitality industry. And so we started as home brewers, and actually the first brewery that we had in Lucan was a 15-gallon system. The next one was a 30-gallon system. The next one was a 60-gallon system. Then we moved on to the 15-barrel system right here when we moved in 2006. So it was literally scaling, and it was great because you got to learn the basics of home brewing and the basics of brewing.
Yep. Then
you got to throw a little bit against the wall on a really small scale, in a way that you're not wasting materials. If something goes wrong, you're not, you can get some instant feedback. And so that really kind of taught us how to brew commercially, or at least the basics of brewing commercially, before we took bigger steps.
So as a home brewer, what was the craziest thing to ever come out of your fermenters?
That's a great question. Back then, so this would have been in the mid to late 90s. Back then, pepper beers, I tried and screwed up a pepper beer like a lot of guys did back then.
Too many or too few?
Too many. Yep. It's always too many. Most of what I did back then was by today's standards, pretty mild. The hop craze wasn't there yet in the late 90s.
Exactly.
We were still trying to brew a little bit of what you could buy off the shelf back then, and so like an IPA was kind of what you aspired to back in the mid 90s, and you didn't have a whole lot of buddies that were going to share your IPA with you. Now, of course,
now everybody
begs
wants
for it. Yeah. So back then, I'm telling you, it was pretty mild, and it was just finding. Back then, it was about finding ingredients and just getting different things because you didn't have the homebrew shops like you have now.
Yeah.
You didn't have the availability of the specialty malts,
and you didn't have online retail.
And you didn't have online retail. Exactly right. And so if you're a Southwest Minnesota homebrewer, you really cherish those trips to the Twin Cities when you could stop at a place and get a little bit of malt, and you had to really plan ahead. So back then it was a little bit less about what you could make. It's just about being able to make something, which I guess I never really thought about until you just asked me.
So, at what point in your homebrewing career did you say, I can make a living doing this?
I'm still not sure I can make a living doing this, but back then, as a brew pub, we 100% the entire reason why we put a little brewing system in that restaurant was to get people there to eat the food. Mm-hmm. It was to drive traffic and nothing more. There was no plans beyond having a shtick or having an identity, I should say, as a restaurant. So that's what we were trying to do, was just have an identity as a restaurant. And of course, being out in Southwest Minnesota, even geographically, it was kind of a big deal because there just weren't breweries back then like there are now. Yeah. And so it was, it really, I don't know that there was that aha moment where we're like, beer's going to be what we're going to do. It was always just little steps. It was little, all right, now we can afford this piece of equipment, or now we can justify this expansion in terms of capacity. And so there's never been a moment like that, and now that we're in a bigger brewery that we have to staff and maintain and pay for and everything, we're still kind of making sure that it's okay, not assuming that this is going to be some great big thing. We're still fighting the beer battle, if you want to call it that.
No, that's a good term for it. So, Lucan, that was kind of an interesting town to start a brewery in. I mean, we're talking a town of, for those not familiar with Lucan, Minnesota, I mean, we're talking a population of less than 300 people. Why Lucan?
Well, it was home. My whole family was born and raised in Lucan or around Lucan. It was a natural progression. We owned a restaurant in town, liked that business, liked the area, liked the people, and we understood the uniqueness of the situation. Mm-hmm. We knew that it was going to be a little bit different to have a brewery in a town of 250 people, 220 people. And that would be something that would raise eyebrows. And so it was a great little fit. And it allowed us to be as much a part of the beer community as we wanted to be. And we could go out and do shows and tastings and festivals and whatnot and become a part of the beer community at large. Or we could go back to Lucan, work on things, fix things, tweak things, and nobody would ever know it because they're not in our front doors. We're not. There were definitely some challenges in being out of the not in front of people in that way. Yeah. But there were advantages, and we were able to take advantage of them.
So, at what points? Now you finally moved to the Red Barn here now.
Yep.
And you guys are in the Red Barn. At what point did you say, "Hey, this might work"?
When we started to add equipment and capacity. Okay. When we started to buy fermenters that were bigger than the ones we started with, then we knew that that there was going to be some growth to it. It's probably been 4 years now. We just had a gangbuster winter where distributors were who had been taking 2 or 3 pallets of beer, were taking a truckload of beer, and so we were really scrambling to grow. And for the last few years, by 4 or 5 years, we've grown at something like 80% capacity every year, and so. Which doesn't mean much when you're only brewing a couple hundred barrels when you start, But as we grew, it became a little bit more apparent that it's something that could sustain itself, And now it's just a matter of how to properly maintain it, scale it, while not changing what you do.
Yeah. So I know we're not too far from Lucan, Minnesota, here in Marshall, but we are a little bit. What prompted the move to Marshall? Because it was a larger city and it's part of a larger population, or was there another logical thinking behind moving to Marshall?
Well, the original driver for the decision was utilities. Small towns, unfortunately, don't have the water and wastewater a pond system for wastewater.
Okay.
And we couldn't use it because brewery is just a little too hard on that, on something like that.
Yeah.
And so we needed wastewater capabilities, and that's what started the conversation. Now, as we talked about where to
So
go,
wastewater was what started the conversation.
yep, absolutely.
It's just one of those things you don't think about when you're starting up a brewery. Is that
No.
wastewater is the reason why you decide this is where we need to move.
No, you're exactly right. And looking back on it, if we'd have done our homework, we'd have known that going into it. You know, as far as being a brewery, we were just happy to make beer, and you know that's where our focus we hoped was always going to be. Now we know that you have to. There are other considerations, you know, energy, wastewater, those types of considerations. So that started the conversation, and then as we even during the conversations with different cities who could accommodate us, that's when the tap room bill came about, and so then that threw a whole nother wrench into how we made that decision, what we were going to do, and so we had talked with several cities who were very good about letting it be known that they wanted a brewery, they wanted a tap room. You know, it's kind of a nice thing to have in your community now. It's retail, it's commercial, it's industrial. It's a lot of good jobs and different kinds of jobs. And so, but Marshall was really positive. They were aggressive. They were helpful. This both the city proper, and the community as well have just been so supportive of us. And you see it in our tap room every day. So, and then for us, it's a 20-minute drive from Lucan, from home, and so we consider it almost just moving down to across town as opposed to this wholesale pickup and leave the area.
Yeah.
And Marshall, is anybody around here will tell you, Marshall's kind of the hub for Southwest Minnesota. It's kind of a little hub city, and so it puts us in great proximity to both the Twin Cities and Sioux Falls. We see a lot of traffic
that one
from Sioux Falls and Brookings, and so it's in some ways you think it might be out in the middle of nowhere, but for us actually it's kind of centrally located from the places that we like to travel.
Now you guys are already in the Sioux Falls market?
Yep.
So and how's that working out for you guys?
Sioux Falls has always been terrific for us.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great beer market. Eastern South Dakota as a whole is a great beer market, and there's a little bit of pent-up demand there. If you go west of the brewery here, you don't find another brewery like that, like us, until Spearfish, the guys out at Pro Peak.
So now we're back in to where your bright tanks and your fermenters are. So how much capacity have you added since moving here? Did you add any capacity from the old brewery, or?
Yeah, we did. We added 4 new fermenters and a couple of bright tanks.
And how much do those new fermenters hold, roughly?
Each of them are about 40 barrel gross.
Okay, 40 barrels. So how much do you guys have capacity to go at one time?
You know, I think depending on the mix of ales to lagers, depending on the beers we're doing, I think we can do about 11,000 barrels out of the facility as it sits with the fermenters that we have.
Okay. And then about how long does it take you to make an ale, and how long does it take you to make a lager?
Really depends on the beer, but a basic ale, mood juice for instance, we can turn around in roughly 15 days or so.
Okay.
15 to 20 days.
A little over 2 weeks?
Yep. A lager for us is about a month and a half.
Okay.
We'll ferment out for roughly 2 to 3 weeks, and then a lagering period to follow.
Okay. Do you have special containers for the lagering?
No, we don't, and that's so that ties up our fermenting vessels, and so that's what affects our overall capacity.
Okay. What do you guys have cooking right now, or what are in some of these tanks?
You know, we've got a little now with the tap room. We can do some partial batches or single one-off batches. So we've got an ordinary bitter. We have a Vienna lager in one of the tanks over there. Rubiks Black just released yesterday. Let's see, what else do we have? We have a strong Bonkrigi that's been barrel aged and soured. We've got a Munich Dunkel in the works. And then, of course, our core year rounds. And then we're finishing up 100-yard dash right now, too. So we've got a few tanks that are dry hopping 100-yard dash as well.
Okay. Do you guys have anything new that's coming that might be hitting the cities here anytime soon, or that we should be looking out for?
You know, we're working on something for after Christmas, like January.
Okay.
But
Can't tell us a little bit too
I
much
can't
about
tell you
it.
what it is yet because it's just, there's a good chance I might change my mind so many times between now and then.
So it hasn't even hit the boiler.
Hasn't
yet.
even hit the kettle yet.
Okay.
Nope, it's recipe and pilot brewing stage right now.
Gotcha.
So the one thing though I'd want to say is with the space and the new facility, it will allow us to do more seasonals, more one-offs and things like that. And we're excited about that because it's that diversity that kind of makes it fun to brew beer. And we haven't had that in the old building, so you know I like to tell people we'll get better at making seasonals.
Sounds good. So with the new setup, if you had to change one thing about it, what would you change?
That's a good question too. Overall, I can say we're extremely happy with the layout as it is. If I was going to change things, it would be like locations of individual pieces of equipment, or you know, plugins and hoses and things like that. That's what I would change. Little nitpicky things, detail things. In terms of like major wholesale changes of like a room or a process or something like that, I think we're pretty happy where we're at. We still haven't even begun to fill the space, and so you know we can make compromises.
So now I know you guys just moved in here, so you don't have any plans on going anywhere else right now. But if you guys were to pick up today and move to a new location, what would be one thing that you would have to keep?
In terms of equipment, or in terms of
Process, equipment, what is just something that you absolutely cannot live without?
right now, you know, it's a big part of our identity. The fire truck's got to go with us. You know, it's kind of an important part of who we are now as a brewery, and so that fire truck would have to travel with us.
Questions portion. So, Andy, what do we got in the mailbag today?
Yeah, Dave from Maplewood asks, what is your favorite food and Brau Brothers beer pairing?
For me, that's easy. I like barbecued food with Bonkrigge. I think Bonkrigge does so well with things that are smoked, things that are barbecued. We actually have a smoker right here in the tap room, and I pull pastrami out of there all the time and just chew on it, finger food with Bonkrigge. I think that pairs awesome.
Now, for the ones who aren't familiar with Bonkrigge, I know it's pretty easy to find up in the cities, but do you want to describe that beer just a little bit for us and why it pairs well with the...
Yep, it's a peated smoked ale. So it's a big Scotch ale, right around 7.5% by volume. So it has the maltiness, it has a little bit of crystal in there as well to kind of bring the color out. But we blend two different smoked malts. One is more of a traditional cherrywood smoked malt, and then the other, of course, is peach smoked malt. Big Scotch fans down here. And so it's a unique beer. It's a twist maybe on what most people think of as a Scotch ale. But it's always been a good beer for us, and it's a great pairing beer for steaks, smoked foods, grilled foods, barbecued foods. That's really good in my book.
Okay. Steve from St. Paul asks, what is your favorite Brau Brothers beer and what is your favorite non-Brau Brothers beer?
Ugh.
That's like asking to pick your favorite child.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, maybe not with the non-Brau Brothers one. That should be easy. So
Yeah, I think it's kind of true in most breweries that whatever your newest seasonal, different, something unique, something different, because we've been brewing, for instance, Bonkrigge for years. We've been brewing those beers for years, and so whenever we do something new, that's always my favorite for a little while. I think Hop Session overall, or Sheephead, would be my favorite beers. I like Hop Session because I'm not the biggest guy in the world, and I can handle a couple, 3, 4 hop sessions, and they do really well in the summer. Sheephead as just an overall malt and hop beer with good malt flavor, good hop flavor. I like that.
and extremely sessionable.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as your session isn't too long. No, those would be my favorite beers here. I love I drink a lot of what's brewed down the road at Shell's. We like those guys quite a bit. So I drink a lot of Shell's. I think one of my favorite beers is a beer that they don't make anymore. They did a pale ale, that Green Label Pale Ale.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
It's more of a British style coming from a German brewery, but I thought it was so well made, and that's a beer. That was a good session beer for me.
That's not the Citra Pils, is it?
No. They haven't made this beer in a few years.
A few years, okay.
Yeah, but their pale ale I thought was terrific. Not necessarily a German style beer; it's more British. But I really like that beer, and it's kind of something unique for this area of the world, which doesn't have the biggest craft beer selection.
Okay, Dan from Bloomington asks, what has been your biggest hiccup as a brewer?
Our biggest hiccup as a brewer has been we want to do everything ourselves, and that gets us into a lot of trouble. You know, we like to fix things, build things, grow things, malt things, harvest things, and sometimes it takes us away from what we should be doing, which is brewing beer. And so we get off on tangents that have kind of maybe slowed us down in just our core business, which is a brew house and a set of fermenters. And so,
like filming podcast shows.
Yeah. No, this won't screw up my week. I've screwed up my weeks doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, and that has been. Well, in some ways it helps us. Sometimes there's a breakthrough and some stupid idea that you have while you're sitting drinking beer actually pans out. For everyone that does, there's probably a dozen that, you tried something, you took a shot at something, and it didn't pan out. And so we're a little bit quick to pull the trigger on some crazy ideas, and that's what will catch us now and then.
Okay. Alan from Cottage Grove asks, my liquor store has always only carried two kinds of Brau Brothers beer, Blue Juice and Ben Craigie. How can a consumer help get more kinds of Brau Brothers at their local liquor store?
Just keep asking for it. The other thing you can always do is email me at the brewery here, info or Dustin at braubeer.com, and I'll get a hold of the distributors. And the distributors, retailers nowadays are so good about listening to consumer demand. In fact, if it wasn't for consumer demand, the craft beer industry wouldn't look like it does right now. Most of the placements we get on store shelves is because somebody came to the brewery or tried the beer, liked it, and went home and asked for it at their local place. And that's how we get so many liquor store and draft placements as well. And so keep asking for it. Send me a note so I can get a hold of the distributor, and the distributors are terrific at following up on requests like that. That's a good question.
Okay, last one. Mike from Hastings asks, what is the very worst task that has to be done in a brewery?
In the old brewery, cleaning out the mash tun on a 110-degree day was the worst task. Cleaning the grease out of the bottom of some of our bottling equipment is right up there on the list. Some of that grease has been down there for a little while. It's a 1975 filler. For us, it's pulling spent grain. We don't have rakes in our mash tun. So every kettle turn, somebody is reaching in there with a hoe and pulling out up to 1,500 pounds dry weight of spent grain, and then hauling it across the building and finding a home for it. So that's if there was a beginner job where if we had interns, that's what you'd have them do. That would be pulling spent grain, yeah.
So do you guys recycle your spent grain then?
Yep, gets fed to cattle just outside of town.
We're in the Brau Brothers tap room, and you're starting us off here with the Belgian wit, which is Whitecap, right?
That's right. It's our take on a Belgian wit, a pretty modest malt bill, obviously a healthy portion of wheat, a little bit of coriander, sweet orange peel. It's just over 4%, so it's a good starter beer. It's a good gateway beer. It's a good everyday drinker, and it's been really good for us here.
It's nice, smooth, clean. Definitely, I'm getting that coriander and that orange flavor out of it. It's
got a great head to it, and it's leaving a nice Brussels lace to it too. So yeah, it's a good beer. Real golden color, slightly hazy.
Yes, we've only had about a half a dozen people email us and tell us that it's not cloudy. It's not supposed to be cloudy. This is a crystal wit, so it's filtered, it's fine, and so it's a clear beer.
Now, this is one of your guys' newer beers. I've only seen this one out on the shelves now for a couple months now, out in the cities at least.
Yep. We brewed a strawberry wheat, which is pretty popular down here at the time. And we wanted to mix it up a little bit, so we replaced the strawberry wheat with this. This is kind of, we always call it if Blue Moon and Hogarten had a baby, this is it here. And we do use a Belgian yeast, but like I said, we keep the malt bill a little bit simple, more like an American wheat beer, and then let the seasonings do what they do.
Very good, very refreshing, great spring beer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here we're on to our second beer. And this is your Ringneck, which is your brown ale.
We just call it a double nut brown ale.
Okay.
It's a little bit bigger.
Now, why is it a double nut? How does that differ from a regular brown ale?
It's not, when people think of nut brown ales, they think of like an imported British brown. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a little bit lighter in color, kind of a little bit more, I don't want to use the word drinkable, but a little bit more mainstream. Mm-hmm. This has it's a little bit heavier on the crystal malt. There's a little bit of chocolate malt in there. We use two different oats. One, of course, is the toasted oat. I think that's what kind of drives the flavor in this guy. And then we also use a pretty old-fashioned British kind of a draft design yeast. And so it's not what people think of as a nut brown ale in modern terms. It's a little bit throwback.
Well, I mean, most brown ales that I've had are really, really sweet. Mm-hmm. Where this is really mellowed out in the sweetness department. You're getting a little bit more of the hop presence from it. It feels more full body. Does that make sense?
No, I know exactly what you're saying. It's a rounder beer. And I have always liked it because it's kind of a complete beer. It does have a little bit of hops in there, but it's malt is definitely the star of the show.
Yeah, the key presence, of course. Yes.
That. But if there's ever been a recipe that we've tweaked more, this is one we've really played with because we want it to be a tad fruity, a tad malty, a tad nutty, just a little bit of chocolate, and pulling that all together. Now, the one flavor I always try and make sure we can find in there is sort of a raspberry nuttiness to it, and that's all from the oats that are in the beer. And so this is an example of designing a recipe around a single ingredient, and that's what we did. This was the first seasonal we'd ever done, so this one's probably 5-6 years old, and it's one that we pulled from the seasonal lineup to make year-round because we like to drink it.
Now, you said you've changed the recipe up a little bit on this one? Since
over the years.
Over the years.
Yep. It became a little bit more chocolatey, and this is an example too of a beer or a recipe where the ingredients have changed year to year as we receive them in the brewery. And so sometimes these oats will come in 20-30 degrees Lovabond, darker and nuttier and richer than in other years. And so that's one where we actually have to kind of keep an eye on it and adjust and tweak based on it.
Gotcha. It's very good, extremely drinkable. It's not as sweet as I remember it from when we were at the Lucan Brewery a couple years ago. So, in fact, I think it's even more drinkable now.
Yeah, it's being a bigger nut brown ale. You want to be careful to make it not sessionable in a pub because people expect when they go into a pub or a brewery that the brown ale not be too much of anything. Yes. Brown ales are traditionally, a buddy of mine calls them this, a tweener beer. There's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that, but it's not all hops.
It just all comes mellowed out.
That's exactly right. And so, while there's a time and a place to make a brown ale crazy, don't get me wrong, and we look forward to it. This is a great, what I would call an everyday drink.
Okay, so we're on our third beer here, and this is one of my favorites from your guys' brewery. Always has been. This is your American Bitter Sheephead Lager.
Sheephead has always been kind of a flagship for us in that it fills a lot of holes in our beer lineup. It's not an IPA, but we treat it like an IPA, and that it has a little bit of late edition as well as early edition hops. But having said that, I think it's an underrated beer in terms of maltiness. There's a lot of good malt in this beer, and if you can see through the hoppiness right away, I think it definitely ranks as a good sessionable, slightly bitter beer.
So yeah, the initial aroma I'm getting out of it is definitely that Cascade hops presence.
Yep, exactly right. This is a sea hop beer, so it's Centennial, it's Cascade, and it's actually a pretty simple recipe. But underneath that, there's a bit of aromatic malt. There's
absolutely.
a couple different crystals in there, and so we didn't want it to be a total sellout hop beer, but kind of a more complex layer.
Yeah, and it definitely comes off as that. Now, is that caramely flavor that comes from the crystal malt, right?
Yep. Yeah, there's no dark malts in this. This is not a 2% chocolate malt beer or anything like that. This is total crystal malt and aromatic biscuit type malts.
Yeah, still one of my favorites. One of my classic favorites from you guys.
This is the first hoppy beer we ever brewed. And this beer's got a few years on him too. And so back when we first brewed it, it was a little bit of a more hoppy beer. Now, of course, there should be triple sheephead, quadruple sheephead, but...
Now, this was in your guys' initial lineup, right?
No, this was a seasonal that we really like to drink.
That got promoted.
Yep, it got promoted. Yeah. Yeah, you notice that when we first started out, we used to name beers after styles. Brau Brothers Cream Stout, Brau Brothers Strawberry Wheat, Brau Brothers Pilsner. Which was nice, but then people like to slot those beers into beer slots, and we found that it was beneficial to go with more fanciful, as the government likes to call it, more fanciful names that are A, more memorable, and B, allow us to play within styles without having to
adhere to it.
Yes, I'm not trying to re-brew somebody else's beer. We're brewing a beer, and it happens to have characteristics from different styles. If that makes any sense at all.
No, it makes perfect sense. Still one of my favorites. So this is our fourth beer, and this is the Craigie Sour Scotch, right?
Yep.
So I'm smelling this aroma, and this is an extremely unique aroma for beers. And I'm definitely smelling the sourness to it, but would you call that a green apple with a mix of raisin to it, maybe?
Actually, raisin's good. I wouldn't have picked it, but since you say that, a little bit of a cherry, like a dark cherry.
Yeah, now once you say that, now I'm picking that up, so.
Exactly, and people don't like to describe it like this, but it's a smoked beer, so there are the phenolics. So you'll get, not quite a Band-Aid phenolic, but you will get the smoked phenolics.
That's extremely smooth. It's not as heavy on the palate as I thought it was going to be. It has a heavy mouthfeel to it, but it's not as heavy as I thought it was going to be.
No, so when you sour a beer like this, you ferment it out well past its attenuation levels that it otherwise would be, and so what that does is it kind of thins the beer down a little bit, in almost like a wine type of way. And so what you end up with is a lower terminal gravity, which kind of tricks you into thinking that it's a more drinkable beer than it really should be.
Yes. I'm actually picking that up myself quite a bit. That it's this one will hit you hard and fast.
So we did 60 barrels of this beer and aged it in our used Templeton barrels, the same barrels that we use for rye wine and the Belgian.
Are you using Brettanomyces to get this sour?
No, we didn't. Nope, it's all lactobacillus.
Lactobacillus?
Okay. Yep. So, in fact, we thought about finishing it off with Brett, but we were too impatient.
Okay.
So, Brett's a really slow worker.
Okay.
And so, I think we'll inoculate those same barrels with Brett and lock the door and leave it in there for a little while for the next beers that come out of these barrels. But we got to the point where we weren't pulling much barrel flavor out of those barrels anyway, so it was a good time to start souring some beers, throwing them in there, and seeing what came out. And so that's what we did. We took half of it, threw it in a bright tank and finished it off, and then half of it we'll finish off on cherry.
It's delicious. It's a very unique flavor. I'm not quite sure if who I would pick to share this one with if I were to get some of this. It's delicious. It's great, but it's just, this really showcases the range of flavors that beers can produce, because this is not anything that I would ever have expected out of a beer. Is that kind of what you were going for out of this, or?
This being our first sour,
Okay.
intentional sour. And then doing it with a beer. So what we wanted to do was do something fun with Blackberry. Blackberry is one of our favorite beers. But yet, it kind of takes a backseat to sheephead and moon juice sometimes. So we put this in the barrel. And then we upped the smoke by about 4 to 5%, because we didn't know how much smoke would last with barrel aging, and it really didn't. I mean, it really ate into the smoke through barrel aging. And so what you're left with is, you get a little bit of the green apple, a little bit more of the sour beer aroma, but the smoke shows itself in the flavor as opposed to necessarily smelling a big smoky beer like you will with Blackberry.
That's a very unique beer. I mean, and I'm enjoying it tremendously. But it's like I said, it really showcases that range.
It's our thing was, is it too sour? So we did a lot of blending to try and take maybe one of the more sour barrels and then blend it back. And we actually did blend it back with unsoured beer just to boost it up again, because it came out pretty tart.
So would you do it again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Having the time though, I would have finished it with Brau.
Okay.
Yep. it would, the earthiness, the more earthy sour of Brau would have helped it.
Yes. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. Okay, so here we're on to our fifth and final beer for today, and this is the Rubiks Blackberry Porter.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about this beer.
This is a beer we did as a one-off beer about 3 years ago, and just put it in the 750s, and it really was kind of quite popular for us, so we got a lot of requests to do it. We thought as a tap room release, it would be kind of unique to throw it on, because we actually really liked it as well, and it's kind of nice to have a beer like this you drink. It's a tad bit fruity. There's natural blackberry in there, and a little bit of natural chocolate as well, nibs. And on top of that, it's a malty. We call it an imperial porter. It's a little bit big. It's right around that 9% area, so a little bit bigger beer. But it's one that we've had a ton of requests for, so we're kind of happy to bring it back, even if it's just a one-off batch.
It's extremely smooth. I mean, I'm really shocked as I'm tasting this. I feel like I'm biting into a really expensive candy bar.
It's like it's more milk chocolatey as opposed to dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Like moo juice or a lot of the Guinness style flavors like the Belgian dark chocolate. This is more like the sweeter milk chocolate. And by adding the nibs, by adding the actual chocolate to it, that I think brings out that part of the beer itself.
Yeah, it's an excellent beer. I mean, it's very well carbonated too for a porter.
Yes, and that's purely intentional.
Okay.
No, we wanted to keep it as, if there's such a thing as a drinkable 9% porter, we wanted this to be it. And so the carbonation helps that a little bit. The other thing that carbonation does is it helps bring out the fruit in the aroma, the chocolate in the aroma, and it kind of helps build that a little bit. As in with a beer engine, you'll pull that through a sparkler and you'll kind of help create that. When you're just pulling it on draft with a CO2 system, you need a little bit of help.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that now that you say that. It does help carry the flavor from one end of the palate to the other.
It's the blackberry does some cool things. It makes it just a tad bit tart, almost like a raspberry type of tartness, but yet it's got that fullness of like a blackberry or a blueberry. I think the actual blueberry blackberry flavor melds with a stout better than like a cherry or a raspberry or like a lighter red fruit like that. And so it's they're flavors that just for whatever reason melded together. Now there's a lot of, again, this beer's got for beer geeks, homebrewers, a lot of Special B, a lot of biscuit, a lot of aromatic, lighter chocolate malts, and crystal. We didn't want to go in with roasted barley or anything like that or anything too deep because we wanted to keep it if there's such a thing, on the lighter side of a 9% Imperial Porter.
Yeah, and you guys did a very good job. I mean, I can't taste the alcohol in this at all. I mean, it's very well balanced, very good mouthfeel, and it carries all the flavors that you're looking for out of it.
Almost a little milky. You know, that tartness almost makes it a little bit more of a lactose-type milkiness to it.
Well, first off, before I finish my beer here, I'd like to thank you for having us sit down at your brewery. So, prost to you.
Yeah, thanks for coming down.
Well, thanks for having us.
I always tell people, when you're willing to drive down here, we got to serve you some beer.
Definitely, and so we'll be making the stop hopefully more frequently than we.
You guys are always welcome.